Welcome back to the AMANI Project. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. Happy day, everyone. Listen, are you ready? Because I am. Today, we're going to be talking about education, gardening, being a vegan, and so much more with Tafari, who is joining me now on the Amani Project platform. Welcome, Tafari. It's so good to sit down with you. Hi, hi.
Hi, how you doing? Greetings, greetings.
Greetings to you as well. I am so looking forward to today's conversation. Tafari, you had me busy. You had me busy. And let me tell you, leading up to this interview, you had me busy because I was so enjoying learning about you as I was reading through your history, who you are, what you're about. So I'm looking forward to being full, like having a meal with you today. So, welcome again to the Amani Project. And I want to start off. I mentioned in our intro, I mentioned, or in my intro rather, that you are an educator, a gardener. I'm going to go even further, a vegan chef, a caterer. You are a mother, you're a grandmother. And we're going to talk about Trinidad too. So you are all of the above. So many beautiful roles that and titles that you hold. And so I really want to start off by taking a step back and talking about little Tafari. I want to visit baby Tafari. Can we go back to Trinidad for just a
Yeah.
moment?
As I
Yes.
look at the snow outside, I wouldn't rather be doing anything but going back to Trinidad right now.
Well, listen, if we were not in the global climate that we are in right now, I would be jumping on that plane with you. I really would. I would. So, where can I ask, where were you born in Trinidad? Tell me about life in Trinidad.
I was born in Mayaro. It's a small village close to where all of the oil is excavated to come all across the world. A lot of our roads here, a lot of the natural gas we use comes from there. So it's a small village, and I've always known it to be very busy because there are always people outside of the village passing through to go to Guayaguari where the drilling sites were. Um, I I lived with my grandmother, and I think it was for my one of my birthdays. I don't remember this, but they've told me this. My aunt decided to have a party for me. Her and my uncle couldn't have children, and I went there. I stayed for the party, and when it was time to leave, I told everybody to go. I'm going to live here now. And they let me. So I grew up with my aunt and uncle for my formative years who didn't have children. So I got so much attention. And I'm cute. So I was spoiled because I was cute. I was brilliant. And my uncle loved nothing better. So I had a really amazing childhood. But I'm biracial. I'm African and Indian, and both families shared me. So there were times when I was with my black family, then I'd have to go to my Indian family and then come back to my black family. So I moved back and forth. Some of the families lived out of Trinidad, so I had to travel to go there. So I had a really full childhood. Where I live has the best at the time had the best beach on the island. So in the summertime, we had crowds coming from everywhere because Mayaro had the best beach at the time. It's changed over the years because with all the drilling, a lot of oil is in the water now, so it's not as beautiful. Like the last time I went back there, there was a lot of tar on the beach and a lot of oil, but I still went to the beach every single day for the 3 weeks I was there.
I spent a lot of my summers growing up in Trinidad, and so Guaigari was one of the places that we used to visit Port of Spain. But I spent most of my time in San Fernando.
Okay,
And
yes,
so I know the beauty of Trinidad, the smells of Trinidad, the sky. I miss the sky, Tafari, in
yes.
Trinidad and the beautiful sandy beaches. So I have lots of wonderful memories of Trinidad. If you had the opportunity right now to be able to just reach over into Trinidad, for me, I would just love to just reach over and spend time with my grandmother. Oh, I had some great times with my grandmother, my
Yes.
cousins. What are some of your favorite memories growing up in Trinidad?
Being around my grandmother was one of them. She was the village healer. So I spent a lot of time with her going through the bushes and looking for herbs and stuff to create her various healing tinctures. She had a great sense of humor. I went back when I was an adult to actually write a book on herbs with her, but she didn't know the names of things. Like she said, this is good for this and this is good for that. So I have pictures and this is, but I have no names of the herbs because she didn't know them. She just vibed with them and she was able to create. She actually had a cure for asthma. I went back in 2010 with my granddaughter, and we were in the market, and all these grown-ups were coming up to me and telling me that my grandmother cured them of asthma and cured their children. And my granddaughter, who has a little bit of asthma, is saying, "But I live in Canada, and there's nobody curing me of asthma." But by the time I went back to learn the cure, a lot of those herbs were had become extinct for aesthetic reasons. A lot of the herbs grew like along the road, and for aesthetic purposes, they used chemicals to keep the grass down, and we lost a lot of those herbs. So I was never able to make that cure.
I think it's so special to Farai to consider just how much our earth has so much great healing power within it. Herbs, plants, flowers, and so much more, so much more. You're really bringing up a lot of memories for me now. I remember when we were little, my uncle would split open. My uncle Mervyn, hi Uncle Mervyn, would split open an aloe. And anything that we had, if we had a burn, he'd say, put some aloe on it. If we cut ourselves, put some aloe on. Everything was aloe. It was always about aloe. And so spending time learning about aloes growing up was a huge thing for us. So the earth brings forth so much for us, and at times to know that we don't always tender it and take care of it as well as we should can be devastating because there's so much healing power that comes from it.
My front yard right now has over 50 healing herbs. I grow culinary herbs in the backyard, but the front, I just grow a lot of women like valerian, because there's so many young girls don't understand the connection between eating too much sugar and having period cramps. So I grow a lot of those herbs that I can make tea for them in my front yard. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, where did it all of the beginnings rather of your investment, your time, the energy that you spent in being a gardener, being a vegan chef, a caterer, where did those beginnings start? Was it your grandmother or was it others that inspired the beginnings of that journey?
My uncle always grew food around his house. He didn't call it a garden or a farm. He just grew food around the house. And so he always planted corn and peas and cassava. I remember like being 3 years old, and he would dig the hole and I would have to put the seed in and then watch it grow. And so when my aunt would finally cook the food, she would always say, "Oh, we eating her peas today and we eating her cassava today." And so those things really boost your ego and your self-esteem. And so I always loved growing. And living in Canada, we were lucky enough to always rent a house that had a backyard with my mom. So we always grew food, and she grew food on the balcony when we lived in an apartment building. And when I moved out, I used to rent a plot from the city. So I grew food every summer um, on city land. And then the house I am in now, we have a 50 by 100-foot backyard. So I grew everything in the backyard. And it's it's very natural to me. I can't see a year will come and I don't plant food. Like I already sat down last week and planned out my garden for this year because it has to happen. Like I don't know a summer without growing food. And the whole time I worked with the city, it was working in gardens and demonstration gardens where I was able to teach teenagers how to grow food. So it's very natural. And if you're growing the food, the chef comes in, because you have to cook it, you have to prepare it, you have to preserve it. So it's a natural flow for me, really.
Did most of your training come from, and the preparation for what you do now come from being on the land firsthand and having that practical experience, those practical opportunities to get in there and work on the land, or did it come from additional places as well?
No, it was the experiential learning of actually being on the land. Like, I love playing in dirt. I love mud. I love my hands in mud because I've always had it. And I encourage children to do it. Like, if children come to my home during the summer, they're not allowed to go in the garden with shoes on. They have to go barefooted and feel the dirt under their foot and pour water and turn it into mud. And people don't understand the significance of connecting with the earth.
Mm.
A lot of the minerals we buy in the
Mhm.
store and take as, you know, vitamin pills and these things, those minerals are in the earth. So every time you interact with it, you're naturally getting those things. When you garden, every time you stick the shovel, it breaks the earth apart and you're inhaling all of these nutrients that you'd be buying from the store. And people don't understand the connectedness of that. So I've had people come and they're sick and they're not feeling well. Going in the garden, take your shoes off, and spend a day just being barefooted in the soil. Other than the soil giving the plants nutrients to grow, us actually interacting with the soil is amazing. And we have to understand why we need to make an effort to take care of the soil, because without soil, there's nothing. So I always have compost bins. So I'm always creating soil. Any program I do with the city around gardening, I have the children create soil from food waste. So they actually see the process of, you put some rotten apples in, the worms eat it, they poop, and there you have soil. And that's important. Having soil is important. Touching soil. I feel so sorry for children who live in apartment buildings. So they walk on cement, they walk on pavement, they're in their building, they come back out, they're in the car. They never actually touch the soil. And then for a lot of the young people who were born here had that experience, don't allow their children. So they dress them up. And if they come to my garden, when you come to pick up your child, you're picking up a child that's covered in mud and dirt, and they had a great day. And they would fuss like, look how dirty you are, and look, you dirty your new shoes. And so the emphasis they put now is on the things. When my son briefly went to public school, and when I went to pick him up and he was disheveled and dirty and just, I knew he had the best day ever, because he was outside, he rolled in the dirt, you know. But we're taking that away from children. And now with social media, it's like they don't go outside at all. And they're missing those things.
I love how you are teaching them to honor the earth. I love that. Honor the earth and getting your fingers and your hands in. It's intriguing for me to listen to this because I remember as a little child not wanting to put my hands in the dirt. My mother would garden and I didn't want to put my hands in the dirt. I was often very nervous about the idea of running into a worm or something, that might be hiding underneath the ground. And so this is very intriguing to listen to your perspective on this, especially surrounding, the children, the young ones coming back and being covered with the earth and teaching them how to honor it. I'm even envisioning the earth just resting on their shoulders, resting on their fingers and their hands, and that connection with the earth on their hands and on their bodies. So it's very beautiful, very beautiful.
I often have little gloves. So when I do composting with children, I give them a glove because not everyone could touch a worm. And over time, that same group at the end are not using gloves. They first start off because they don't want to touch the worm. The worm's wiggly, it's whatever. But over time, it's in us. We know this, and we just need something to bring it out. So I make them comfortable. I give them gloves, let them touch the dirt, let them touch the worms. But by the end of the program, there's no need for gloves. Everybody's in the dirt. I had a garden at, because of COVID, it doesn't happen anymore, but I had a children's garden at Oakdale Community Center. And there was this little boy that would come every day and dig a hole and bury his foot, and then dig his foot back up and go home. And I never asked him to do anything else because he looked so happy doing that. And one day there was an event in the school, in the center, and the mom came and she was telling me, she doesn't understand how if he doesn't come, I will call and ask where he was and always insist that he comes. And she doesn't understand because at school he throws chairs at teachers, he fights every day, he gets into trouble. And I'm saying, who are we talking about? This can't be this little boy that comes, he buries his foot, he asks me questions, we talk, he eats his snack and he goes home. The soil calmed him down. That digging the soil and putting his foot and burying it, I never saw this side that she talked about, throwing chairs at teachers. So angry and so violent. And I never, ever saw any of that in like the whole summer he spent with me.
So what are the messages that we then should be teaching our, because what I'm hearing here, I'm loving this conversation. I My mind is thinking now about the messages that we are sharing with young people and also with parents as well, about the appreciation and the respect for the earth. So I'm curious to know, because of course you've done so much work in our community, nonprofits, and more, which we'll get into. What is that message? What should we be saying to young people, to teachers, to parents, to all with regards to how it is that we should be respecting the earth? I heard walking and taking off your shoes. I mean, that in and of itself is powerful before stepping into the garden. What are some of the messages or the things that we should be saying to all with regards to respecting and honoring the earth?
We have to look at life as a complete circle, which encompasses everything. I find in our community, we don't recycling and reusing an environmental issue isn't an issue for us because we're surviving. We're just getting from A to B, being able to put food on the table tonight. But we have to understand that that food can't come unless you're connecting with the earth. Every little thing we do makes the earth more sustainable because we really hurt the environment. We really hurt the earth with so much toxins and greed. But even for children's self, for their calmness and for their state of mind, and the parents might not know it, but the grandparents know it. Like I talk to the program I do now with delivering the food boxes. It's a lot of older women, and they would say how they would be so happy when their mom said to them, "You're not going to school today. You come in the garden with me," because that was a special time for them. And maybe at the time they couldn't articulate environmental issues, or they're doing this because of this, but just being in the soil and planting and growing food was joy. It was joyful for them. And these are women that are in their 60s and 70s. We have an 80 something year old woman that comes to pack, and she's the one that says it, like the days when her parents would say, "You're not going to school, you have to go and work." They call it work the land. She would be beside herself because out of all the school, because in her area, girls didn't get to go to school, first of all. So it was something special for her to be able to go. But the day they said to her, "Work the land," that was her best day for the week. Regardless of, she was happy, she was learning to read, she was in school, she got to wear a uniform, like all the things that made her happy. But that going to work the land day, that was her joy, that was her pleasure. And it's something like a lot of our children have so many issues. And I think if they just spend time in a garden, even if it's 2 months for the summer, it benefits them so much more. And to understand there's not the environment and then there's our home and there's us. We are all in the same circle. We are the environment. The environment is us. Like right now, this COVID they're talking about, it's airborne. That's the environment. It's the air. We have to breathe this air every day. We can't get away from it. And teachers need to do programs in school that show the children their connectiveness to the earth and the environment, and not make it a separate thing. Like when you see clouds, it's not some white stuff up in the air. That is there because there was water in the earth that evaporated. It's going to go there. It's going to sit a while. It's going to come back as rain and wet the earth. They need to show the continuity. They need to show the circle that happens all the time between us and the environment. We're one. We had a school, and we'll probably talk about it later on as well. And so the first year we had the school, the city said they would come and rototill the land for us. So I told the children once it was rototill, they could take their shoes off and go, because rototill soil feels amazing. And I had a dad come. The mom wanted the child to come to the school, but the dad didn't. And so I'm talking to him and explaining the school to him, and his eye was just growing wider and wider and wider. And I turned around, and there was 12 naked children in the garden. They went beyond some of them had their underwear off. There was one girl named Freedom. Freedom was just naked, no clothes on. Just being barefoot in the soil blew their minds, and they just felt free. And all the children took their clothes off. And like I looked at him, and his eye was popping, and I turned around. I'm like, this is not happening. This man doesn't want his child to the school, and this is what he's looking at: 12 naked children in a garden. The child eventually came to the school, but what I saw that day was the freedom that the soil gave the children. I never said to them, don't take your clothes off or take your clothes off, because I wasn't expecting that. I expect them to be barefoot and run around and stomp around in the ground and find nice rocks or whatever. The children were naked in the garden. And I feel like every one of us who gets that chance will feel that. That was the ultimate piece of freedom. And that came from their foot being in the soil. And I think it made better children of them because they looked forward to it. We did vermicomposting. They spent a lot of time in the woods. And I tell people I ran the school for over 20 years and I never had fighting and violence. And, they always got along. They were always cohesive. They always enjoyed each other because we had a lot of nature. Our school was located on a conservation land, parks and PRCA conservation land. So our playground was a stream and bushes, and it helped them calm down because there was no fighting. It helped them focus because they were all brilliant children. When they left our school to go back to public school, they all had to be put in a grade higher because they were so focused, they were so well behaved. And I think that was a big part of it had to do with that school being situated where it was and for them to be able to get all of that. Our reading circle was done every day outside on a circle of logs under trees. That's where we read every day. And Kai, my partner in the school, used to teach martial arts down in the bushes. So the kids would be in the bush doing martial arts. That kind of education for your soul will take you forever in a peaceful life because they had really nice beginnings.
I'm thinking about as you're sharing the educational system and some of the things that I think we really should be considering when it comes to the type of course content that we're serving our students, our young people. I never had a gardening class growing up, so I'm seeing the value. I see the value in that. We had a home ec class. We had a home ec, which I think has been traditional for a lot of schooling platforms. We did have a home ec class, which taught us how to cook, taught us how to be able to put together recipes in a very minimal way. But gardening, Tafari, how beautiful would that be if there were gardening classes that were mandatory in schools?
When my son and I traveled to the Caribbean for a number of years, and when we came back in 1989, he went to H.J. Alexander. And there was a lot of land at the back of the school that wasn't being used. And I went to the principal and I said, can we do a garden? They can start a garden and then they can come back during the summer. And he allowed me at the time. So I always tell my son, we created the first school garden and I was hoping other schools would catch on. Some did, but yeah, the children grew tomatoes and lettuce and they allowed me that. And it was amazing because when we came back, my son didn't fit into school. And I know having the garden, because that's what he was doing wherever we went to Trinidad, we went to Guyana, we went to St. Lucia. He gardened everywhere he went. And that kept him grounded. And other children loved it. And I maintained the garden throughout the summer and families would come. It was very nice. And it's so easy to do. But a lot of education and curriculum, there are too many children in a class. The teachers are overworked. A lot of them are not happy. So they just follow curriculum. But for curriculum to work, it has to be intentional. You have to say, I am feeding their physical, their mental, their spiritual, and plan curriculum for every aspect of that child, not just the old curriculum that people have been using since, as my mom would say, Satan was a fetus. The children have changed, the children's needs have changed. And so there's a lot more behavior problems in school. So you have to counter that, putting them in a garden, having plants growing in the classroom, having them compost in the classroom, just connecting will change the behavior. I know, I guarantee that. I've lived it. I always tell people I went to York, but my education process started when we had our own African centered school, and I had time to learn and look at the children and see. Like, kids came who were fighting every day in where they came from, and that ended when they got to us. You know, there were children who never ate watermelon, and so I gave them watermelon to plant, and they ate all their watermelon, like, because they grew it. So there's a loving connection that happens with the earth and children, and I wish more schools would adapt having a garden. There was a private school at, I want to say Bathurst and Finch, no, Highway 7 and Finch, or Highway 7 and Bathurst, and they had a humongous garden. Each grade had their own garden, and each grade grew things at their level. So the kindergarten kids would grow the easiest plants. If you rough them up a little bit, they wouldn't die. And then the older kids, and I wanted so much to be a part of that school, but you had to go to the States and train. And I was raising my son and going to school and working part-time. I couldn't do it, but it's called the Waldorf. It's a school that I always wanted to be. It's very Eurocentric. And even at that, I was appreciative of it because the children were learning about themselves. So I saw the connection between when you focus on who you are, how you function in the school. So my school had to be African centered.
And I'd like to talk about some of your journey with your school and also with the African food basket as well. Again, you've given so much to community in terms of, well, even beyond the education and understanding how much we should value, appreciate, honor the earth. And um, I'm excited to learn about the African food basket. Can you talk about where that started?
We started 25 years ago. Zola, my partner at the time, went to a meeting at Food Share, and this is something Food Share was doing. And he came back and he talked about it. And I said, well, what's stopping us from doing it? So we wrote a proposal, we got some money. There was a lot of setbacks, but it happened. We were able to purchase food, culturally specific food, and people would order a box at the beginning. When we started, I was still at York doing my placement at Shoreham. And I used to find by 11 o'clock, the children would start fighting. After lunch, there'd be like 30 Black children in front of the principal's office. And I kept wondering, what is that? So I started spending recess with the children outside. And they would come and their lunch would be a pop and a bag of chips, which they would eat at recess. So by lunchtime, they have no lunch. So they would be fighting. And so I said to him, instead of us doing it for the public, let's do it for single moms. So they would pay for their box at the beginning of the month when they get their check. And then by the 15th of the month, when their food and their money runs out, we would deliver this box of food for them. And it worked so well. Like, they loved it. We were delivering like, it sounds so little now because now we're doing 350 boxes a week. At the time, we were doing 75 boxes a month. And it was like so amazing. It was 75 single women. Would they get their check on the first? They pay us on the first, and by the 15th, we would walk up to their door with a box of culturally specific food. And the best part, we started adding a bag of plantain chips. And so I'd be on the road walking, and I would hear children saying, "There's the plantain chips, lady." But we would get to the door, and sometimes, how we love to talk. We'd be, having a short conversation. The kids would just take the apples out of the box and just start eating them, because this is 15 days they haven't had fresh fruit. So I really loved that, and I was passionate about it. And a lot of the parents were the parents for at Shoreham, because I spoke with them every day when they came to pick up their kids. So I pitched this to them, and 5 moms said yes, 10 moms said yes, and the first 10 that got told 20, and it was mostly there we were delivering up at Jane and Finch. And over the years, it just continued. It grew. I mean, I remember when we were doing 150, and we were like, guys, we're doing 150 boxes. But this time it was open to everyone. It wasn't just the single moms, and we were doing a lot of seniors. And I went one day to deliver a box to a senior, and she was telling me she likes getting the cassava, but she can't peel the cassava. And so I would take all the seniors' boxes, go to their home, and peel all their, they call it heavy food, and put it in Ziploc bags and put it in the freezer for them. Sometimes I'd get home at 11 o'clock at night after being there from like 7 in the morning. Because I have this thing with the seniors. Our seniors came to Canada in a time when it was horrible. I'm not saying racism got better, but I know women who came here and people spit on them on the bus and threw garbage on them on the bus. I never had to experience that. So I always feel our elders went through so much for us to be here that I always honor them and staying and peeling the cassava and the yam. And it wasn't just, so I was doing that for them, but the conversations was for me. Telling like, oh, they remember when they used to roast yam. I'm like, I've never had roast yam. And go through that whole, so they would share their recipes and how they ate the food at home. They remember their mom boiling a pot of dumpling and they stealing a dumpling and putting on their hat and running out, hot dumpling in their head, running out to get that extra little bit of food because times were so hard for everyone. So it was a nice give and take for me. Um, there was one home I used to deliver a box, had 6 generations living in the house. Like the baby, the mom, the grandmom, the great great grand. Like it was just, I loved being there. Like it fed me, it fed me like just being there and watching how all these people living in this 2-bedroom apartment. There's no fighting, there's no arguing, everybody loving everybody. And as the box come and we're talking, food is being prepared from the box. It was just, and a lot of time it was vegan because meat was very expensive. So they weren't, the word vegan wasn't in my head at the time, but it was a natural thing. You boil the yam and edibles and cassava and coconut milk, and just a lot of the recipes I got from a lot of the seniors were vegan recipes. Red bean, black eyed peas, and the what they call heavy foods. Um, and having coconut milk as part of that because that gave the fat to the food and the taste. Oh my gosh. Scotch bonnet pepper boiling in coconut milk is a smell that just, it changes your mentality.
I feel like my entire space right now is filling with the sounds, the sweet sounds of families, generations upon generations, and the sweet smell of Scotch bonnet. Yes, it's my space is filling up with all of the above. I remember being very little and learning about the importance of eating together. And so I really appreciate those shares of sitting down and having a meal together, even listening as you're peeling Tafari, peeling and respect and the honor that you're showing our elders. So as you look upon your history and all of the above that you shared, I can only imagine there must be a basket full, but what are some of the triumphs when you look back on the work that you have done thus far? What stands out for you among the stories that you shared, or perhaps some that you haven't given us yet today? What's a triumph that's resting on your heart?
Well, my biggest career triumph was co-running Umoja Learning Circle. The backstory to that was I was going to open an African-centered school in 2 years. So I was collecting resources. I was spending time in Detroit at African-centered school, just learning and getting curriculum from them. And York University had some event, and I went and I met a young woman, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm collecting resources and writing curriculum because I'm going to open my own African-centered school." And she said, "Funny you should say that. I'm sending my daughter to a school with a man named Kai that's running an African-centered school on Eddystone." And she gave me the address. And at the time, my nephew had just started public school. And one day we were walking home, and I said, "Boy, you're never happy when I pick you up from school." And he started crying, and he told me he doesn't like school. And I said, "Why?" And he said, there's no brown people there. And I realized for his first 5 years, all his comfort came from brown people, moms, family, aunties, grandma. And here he was put in an environment that they had no brown people. So he wasn't himself. He wasn't Irie. And the next day was the first parent child interview, and we went, and all the children had to paint their faces on paper plates and have it on the wall. And I didn't see any brown ones. And I said, Malik, where are you? And he showed me a pink face. And his mom started crying at the door. And I said to her, Amaka, don't worry. This woman told me about this school in Eddystone. Let's go tomorrow and see it. And we walked into this school. It was the common room of a church. And there was a table with a piece of African print and a few instruments, shakers, and some African books, and a alphabet going around the wall, and a little plastic table with 2 chairs. And there was the iriest man I've ever seen with a ponytail and these 2 kids. That was the school. And I walked in and I fell in love with the school. And my sister says, I want my son to go there. And Kai was grinning the whole time. He answered all the questions. We looked at the 2 kids. But my school had to be schools that I had known, because that's where I went. I been in daycare, so I want a sand table and a water table and a this center and a that center. There was just the one table. So I said and he did something with the kids and he was creaming his hand. I don't see men cream their hand. I'm like, I love this man. And his ponytail was so nice. And I said, listen, I can help you with the school. If Malika is going to come here, I can help, but I'm taking care of my niece. She's not a year old yet. So I can come some days if I get my mom to watch her. And he said, no, you can bring her. And by the 3rd day, I'm saying to myself, is there a need for 2 African-centered schools? But I can't rein in on the man's parade, because I was ready. I was ready. When I saw what he had, I was ready. I saw the school. And I said, I have some resources at home I could lend you. He said, sure, bring it in. By the 3rd day, Kai walked in and he didn't know where he was, because I had pictures on the wall. I had alphabets. I had animal pictures, bird pictures. I had different little centers. I brought in Lego, and he was like in awe. And we used to take the kids to the library 1 day a week. And one day we were at the library and he handed me $40. And I said, what's this? He said, that's your salary. That's all he could afford. I'm like, $40 is a lot of money. And we started with the few things on the table. And because it was the church common room, we had to pack it up every week. It used to fit in a bag. By the end of 2 months, we were fitting everything into a computer box. And the kids would push the computer box down the hall in the old piano room. And then we'd come on Monday and start again. And we got more students coming in and we were growing. And Kai said, well, we need to get a space. We couldn't find a space. So the school moved to my living room. I didn't have a living room for a year. I had a school in my living room. And then he said, we should look at purchasing a house for the school or purchasing a building. And we had this real estate person came and he took us to 2 places. I wasn't feeling it. Then he took us to this one place and there was this huge tree. And I grabbed Kai. I said, Kai, this is our school. It was out of our financial range. We couldn't afford it. But in talking to the man and woman who owned the house, she worked with children all her life and she wanted the house to go to something that had to do with children. So we got the house reduced. And it was just that. From then on, I dedicated my life to having the most perfect African-centered school you imagine. Sometimes I'd come home at 2 a.m. Zola used to call and say, oh, you with your husband? He used to call the school my husband because I would be there till all hours of the morning. And I watched that school grow and I watched the children grow. And it was just the most amazing thing. I told you the story about the garden we had. We used to grow enough peppers to make pepper sauce for the school for the next year. Malik was in charge of growing the peppers. Malik was amazing at math. Malik used to count how many flowers the tree had and how much peppers the flowers produced. So he'd know how many flowers fell off, how many peppers he'd have to plant the next day. So it wasn't just growing food for him. He was on a math expedition. One day we went, it rained, it was clay soil, and I saw Malik put his finger on his shirt and was wiping off every leaf because the leaf got dirty. He was wiping off every pepper leaf to clean it. That's how much that garden was their thing. But him and the math and how much we need to plant and calculate, and they would weigh how much food we got. It was just that was the connection for me. And then I joined the TRCA board because I really wanted to have use of the land without, having parks people come. And so they gave us as much as the space we wanted to do whatever we wanted to. So we had the huge garden. We were able to do all kinds of environmental experiments all around. We had fox, we had owl, we had eagle. Everything used to come around the school. It was a great learning experience for the children. But for me, watching them learn about themselves and their culture and how they stood out from other children. So we used to drum, and different organizations would pay us to come and drum for them. So we had to drum for Food Share one day. So they sent us a van, and the kids were in the van. They were singing songs. That was the time when they had all the moose all over the city. Every time they saw a moose, they were adding the moose, counting the moose. And when we came back to the school, the driver said to me, she said, this is what I do. I drive children every day, and I have never driven a busload of this kind of children. There was no fight. There was no quarreling. She didn't have to stop the bus once. And I started realizing, yes, they are different. Like even when we played at school, like for Black History Month, we would perform at a lot of the schools, and my kids were always in awe and scared. Like, Tafari, did you see that? He hit him with a book, like, because in their head, because a lot of them came from, this was their first school, so they'd never experienced public school, and they would be like, they can't believe. And he talked back to the teacher, and he told her to F off, and because that didn't happen among us. So even for them, they saw how they were different. And we would go to different places, and they would, like adult situations, we performed at different places, and they would be asking adults, mostly Black History Month, so they'd be asking Black history questions, and my kids would answer, as opposed to the adults in the audience, because they knew stuff. And that just, self-esteem is amazing. That just blew up their self-esteem. And then they would have friends, like sometimes, if another school's having a PA day, people would send their children to us, and the stuff our kids would be doing, the other children would be in awe. They don't know it. They haven't done it. They can't do math at that level. And I operated the school as a family. So I had the Ontario curriculum, grade 1 children should know this thing, and grade 2. So I made sure they met those landmarks, but then they had the other things. So if by grade 2 you know how to count to 100 and could do math up to 48, and you did that, you moved on. Even though you're not at the next stage, you just keep working. You just keep working. And I read to the children every day, so they enjoyed reading. They loved reading. It's what you model is what children will take. Because if you get, my granddaughter started school when she was 6 months old. She was the baby of the school. And by the time her mom sent her to public school, all the teachers were in awe of her, because they would go and she said, Miss, you didn't read to us? Like, because she expected that. So she had to read every day. She still does. Now she reads on her phone, which annoys me, but she has to read every day because it's been ingrained from 6 months old. And so I had that with all the children. We had a vegan lunch and vegan snack, so they ate really well. We had a cooking program, so the older ones learned to cook at an early age. They were like 9 and cooking serious meals in the kitchen. And then we would have volunteers from social work, Ontario Works at the time come. We had a chef, he was a baker in St. Lucia, so he came and he taught them to make bagels and croissants, and just, parents would get mad when their kids would go home. So they know what day was cooking day, and they would get mad when the kids come home and they didn't bring whatever they cooked, because they know it was amazing things they would bring home. And then how we grew as a family. One day, one of the grandmothers came, and Khalil was running and he fell. And all the children gathered around him and dusted him off and brought him a drink of water. And I was coming up the step and she was crying. And I said, are you okay? She said, I've raised 4 children in this city, and I've never seen that. When a child falls, all the other children are supposed to laugh at them and tease them. And here, all the kids ran to him and dusted him off and just took care of him. And she was crying because she couldn't believe there was an environment where children were learning, and it was like this. And then I realized a lot of people would come to the school and cry, and I used to feel away. Like, one day this man came, and school was over, and I was taking him downstairs, and we were growing, this is before we had our grow lab, we were growing basil on the window. And he smelled the basil and started crying because he remembered his grandmother used to grow basil. And that was a memory for him. He used to come to the school every 3 months and he would bring us a bag of things just because he smelled the basil downstairs. So he would buy us workbooks, pencil, crayons, whatever, and bring to the school. And everyone who came, the issue we had was all the people who came to the school and loved the school didn't have money to contribute to the school, but they brought love. So sometimes I used to balance it up. I'd say, we need the rich people to come and see what we're doing and donate money. But how it worked out, the children got love, a lot of love. And it's something that you don't get when you spend a whole day in public school. You have to fight for being called this or called that or not getting good marks. Half of the day you spend in public school fighting. And at Umoja, the children just got love all the time. And so learning came so much easier for them. My friend Keisha was doing a horticultural course at Humber, and she came to the school and we had 157 plants. And she taught them the name of 37, the botanical name, which is Latin words. And she came back 3 months later and the children knew all the Latin names of all the plants. She started crying. Tafari, I can't believe these children. It took me a year to learn these. But because they were so happy and grounded, they weren't hungry. A lot of the times children at public school are just hungry and they fight. These kids had fruit they can go to whenever. They didn't have to have a time. If they're feeling hungry and there's bananas, they can go and take a banana and sit at the table and eat it. So anything you taught them, they were actual sponges that just soaked it all in. Whenever we had projects, they would always do Ancestor. They would do Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. Like, these are the people. Khalil was in love with Frederick Douglass. He read everything. Like, I'm talking adult novels. He would read on Frederick Douglass and he so wanted to be like him. And they were inspired by their own culture. They were inspired by their past, even though, it took me a long time to teach about slavery because I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't want to put it on them, to make them angry. Because I remember one day I was dropping kids home and I was playing Buffalo Soldier. And they asked me about it and I explained it. And, they were ready to fight. And so I held back on slavery for a long time, but I taught the ancestors. I taught inventions, all the things we invented, our people in the past. And they were inspired by those things. Whenever you said project, they already had their project. Before I could say we're going to do a project, can I do this? And it was always culture, ancestors, past. It was just what I wanted. It's just what I wanted to see. And Kai, so I am hyper, and the creator has a sense of humor. So it took hyper Tafari and very, very calm Kai that brought the balance. It was just perfectly balanced all the time. He taught them martial arts and he was always soft spoken and all the boys loved him. And, I'm loud and I'm this and I'm always excited. And so the school was just meant to be. It had a perfect balance. And that's one of the things I learned in life is you must have balance. If you have up, you must have down. If you have tall, you must have short. If you have Tafari, you must have Kai. The food basket is one of my big triumph because we started with nothing and I saw it grow and we touched so many lives. And my son was probably 9 at the time and he's 30 something now, and people would meet him on the street and talk about the basket they used to get. He'd meet women at Fete because he was a big Soca Dread was his name, so Fete was his thing. He'd meet people at Fete who would say, "Yes, my mom used to get the food basket. I remember you and your mom used to come and deliver the food basket to us," and he would have no memory. But these are women and men he would meet at fetes talking about the food basket they used to get, and it was always a joyful conversation. So for me, bringing that joy, because our lives living with racism and all the other negative aspects, to be able to bring joy or experience joy is amazing. It's a wonderful thing. And for me to be able to contribute to that, I was really happy. And I saw us go from ordering food to, at this point, we have some land at Jane and Steel that we grow food and we can put in our boxes. So we've done the whole span, and it's something I'm really, really proud of. We were delivering 350 boxes of food that weighed about 30 pounds every week since the pandemic started to Black families, mostly seniors, because seniors took it the hardest about not going out. They were so afraid to catch COVID. So And again, for me, delivering to the seniors was a positive thing. It was an amazing thing. So yeah, to be able to deliver those boxes to seniors was amazing. And I had the most, the word amazing doesn't describe the volunteer group I had. All women. Um, we had two men that used to unload the truck when the truck came with the food, and it was like 20 boxes of plantain, 20 boxes of banana, lots of weight, lots of heavy, but organizing the packing and getting those boxes done was all Black women who would come lovingly and happy and laughing. And I played music and I would cook them a vegan meal. And then they developed friendships outside of packing the box. And then they got to a point where all of them, because of COVID, were creating and inventing things, and they were selling and buying from each other. And then it got to the point where birthdays were celebrated after packing. The birthdays weren't celebrated at home anymore. People would, if it's Anne Marie's birthday, people would bring cake and juice and sorrel and put wine in the sorrel behind my back. But it was all like to see how the food basket grew to how we started so small. When we first used to pack, it was just family. Me, Zola, my son, my niece, my mom, a woman named Afia. She just passed away. She's a Rasta sister that she was just involved in everything in community. It was just a few of us, and we would pack from in the evening after work till late at night, to the point where we have about 20 volunteers over a 2-day period that would come and pack the boxes and get them delivered. And we weren't able to put as much culturally appropriate food as we used to when they were buying the box, because it was funding that we depended on. But they got sweet potato, cassava, edos, avocado, mangoes, callaloo, and people would wait for their boxes. Like the drivers would come back with these stories. He'd say, "Tafari, come downstairs, and there's 15 women just waiting downstairs." So he didn't have to go to 15 apartments. They're just not downstairs. They're conversing. They've lived next to each other for so long, but they only say hi in the elevator. They're downstairs half an hour, 45 minutes before the box come, talking and laughing and remembering. And certain drivers loved going to certain buildings because there was a granny who'd always bring him some sweet bread or something that she made at home, and it it was so communal and loving. It's something that I really want to see for us, and here it was manifesting in front of me, you know. So it's really, yeah. I really, that was one of my. It still is. This food basket is still dear to my heart. We're on a break right now, but we're looking to start back in February. And yes, just getting those boxes out there. The second lockdown, within 3 days, we had 6,000 people call asking for food. The site crashed after a while because we were overwhelmed. And over the weeks, we managed to get 6,000 boxes out to people.
Wow, my mind is blown right now because I'm thinking about the how food brings community together and the relationship building that has happened throughout this journey for you, Tafari, and all of the wonderful volunteers and people that you're meeting and working with, and the lives that are being touched, so beautifully touched by the offerings of your work and the work of so many. You mentioned some of the things that have also been kind of challenging. You mentioned funding. I wanted to come to that because when you're serving that many individuals and wanting to do it so beautifully and with so much love, I can imagine, of course, at times there are going to be roadblocks like funding. And so I'd like to hear about the roadblocks, but I'd also like to learn a little bit more about how it is that community can come together and serve and support initiatives and work like yours. So what are those roadblocks if you can start there?
So we depended on funding to be able to do a lot of what we had to do. And at the time, funding went to organizations that were organized, established, and already doing things, and they were all white. So we were always at the bottom of the barrel getting the little bits. Even though I felt we were doing more than a lot of the other people that were getting the big money, but every week it happened. Every week there was smiles. Every week there was happiness. So I didn't I didn't let it bother me too much. We worked with Food Share from the inception. Food Share was very helpful to us. We got a lot from them. We used their space without having to pay. When we first started, we were using their boxes until we got some funding to be able to buy our own. But yeah, there were certain things that we should have gotten that there was never time to get, like getting charitable status. We never were able to get that because audited statement costed like $10,000, and so we never had that money. So certain things that we should have had in place that would have made it easier for us just didn't happen. Like I was telling you about community and the environment, we're so busy just getting from point A to point B that we're not doing all the other things that we were supposed to get done. When we first started, I went to a grocery store one day, an Indian grocery store, and they were selling long beans cheaper than we were buying it at the terminal, and they were also buying it at the terminal. So I said to the man, "How is this possible?" And he told me when they go to the terminal to pick up, there's one order that goes in. The order goes to a warehouse, and about 25 other Asian markets come to pick up their food from there. So when you have the one bill, your buying power is more. So you're not buying 2 boxes of plantain, you're buying 40 boxes of plantain. You're getting the plantain cheaper. He said to me there were people who would come to pick up their boxes. There were families who've been fighting for over 200 years, and they couldn't come in the warehouse at the same time. You know, back in the day, a light-skinned person married a dark-skinned person, and the families have been warring ever since. But with all of that hatred and anger they had when they shopped, it was one bill, it was one order. So even we were both at the terminal, they were getting their stuff much cheaper than us because we were buying 5 boxes of plantain where they were buying 45 boxes of plantain. And so I went around, I walked around the city, I drove around the city to all the little Caribbean stores to explain this concept to them and say, like, you know, we're buying 4 boxes, you're buying 4 boxes. If we buy 8 boxes, we get it cheaper. If I get 10 other stores to come in, not one single store agreed to this. A lot of people saw it was obia or they trying to take away business from them, even though we were doing two different business altogether. The concept of trust, that's one of the things that having gone through that nasty slavery that took the trust away from us, we can't trust each other, was one of the things that over 5 years, none of those stores were existing. And if we were working together, I feel if we were working together, some of them would have still been in business because they were competing with a store at Oakdale and Vaughan that was selling everything much cheaper than what they were selling. So people would take the TTC to go there, even though the man who owned that store was rude and obnoxious and touched women inappropriately. They would go there to buy their food because it's cheaper than the store that's just down the street from them, whose plantain is getting black because it's not being bought on time. And I feel if we trusted each other, that would have not have been the issue. When COVID started, I had about 11 Black businesses call us to work together. And I was going through menopause at the time, and I'd come off the phone and I want to cry because this is what I wanted. This is what we wanted for so long, that we worked together. But it took COVID for these organizations to call and say, I hear you doing boxes. Can we order boxes from you? And it was just emotional. Day after day, every call I got, I'm like, wow. And it worked out so well. We were able to work with a number of organizations in the community who did food programs. And so they would order the boxes from us. And when they have their food program, their clients would get the boxes of food. But it took 25 years and nasty COVID to bring that about. And I feel if we could learn from that as a community and just pool and work together, it would make life so much easier. So much easier. Right now, we're trying to get funding to create a food hub where we could bring people in and try and create that. Yeah, because it's so important.
The power of collaboration, the power of trust, the power of community, the power of love. I'm just going to say that too, the power of love. Um, I, when I consider the challenge of community working together, a lot of that is based in the lack thereof of love, the lack thereof of trust, the lack thereof of honoring one another. And I'm talking about not just within our own community, I'm talking about communities, the lack thereof of love. And so I hear your heart when when I hear you talking about the tears, because I can only imagine what that must do for you, that to see it,
Yeah.
knowing that tragedy and crisis and COVID ended up being some of the push to see a lot of that happen. I think is very hard to hear, but at the same time, the tears that you've cried reveal that at least it's here, it's happening, it's happening. So, having said that, what do we do next then, Tafari? What do we do next to ensure that we are? It's such a big and loaded question. I think to myself, what do we do next to ensure that we continue to work together, that we continue to push forward by bringing communities together? How do we push forward in a way that allows us to not only honor the land, honor the earth, also honor each other? I don't even think it's a question so much as it is a thought right now. It's weighty to really
Yeah.
think about the fact that COVID has shifted so much in the way of frameworks around our world, and even in the way of thinking, how we view and value human life, and how we even view and value the earth. I've heard so many say, and I'm sure you've heard it as well, that the earth is getting a chance to breathe right now, getting a chance to breathe because so many of us are not disrespecting it in the way that we were before because we have to stay home. So I hear that very often as well. So I come back to you to say, what's next? What's next for you and the work that you're doing?
One of the things I've always heard, I've always listened to Marcus Garvey and read about Marcus Garvey and listened to all the reggae songs about Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey always said, Black people won't know themselves until their back is up against the wall. And this COVID was the push that pushed us up against the wall. And what we have to do is learn from this. Everything that happens is an experience for learning, and we have to learn. We have to talk to each other. We have to talk about our experiences and look at how we did come together. Look at how people in TCAC buildings would come downstairs, and if five people went there to get their box, one woman would sit there with those boxes until those people came home from work. That wasn't happening 3 years ago. But to have we have to tell our stories, we have to talk, we have to get the stories out there, because a lot of us still live in isolation. We're in our own apartment, we're in our own world, we're in our own suffering. But when we tell our stories over and over and over, this is why things like the AMANI Project is so important. People get a chance to tell their stories, to share their stories. We can learn from those stories. And my generation, we're older now, we understand, we got all of this, but that younger generation has to hear the stories, has to know what happened in the past, what happened now, how we came together. The first year we packed boxes, the whole summer we had students. We had like 20 something students would come to help. And when the packing is going on, I used to play music, but sometimes I would just have people talk, like have some of the elders talk. And these children would be in awe, like these things really happened. And I'm like, where did you grow up? How is it that you didn't hear these things? But it depends on where you are, who you're with. There's some things that are not in your world. Even with social media, like I see people with all this nonsense, they're looking on YouTube, and I don't get these things. These things don't come to me. I get things about growing, about doing the soil. And then my son explained, where you go, that's the kind of information that's sent to you. So for a lot of the youth, hearing some of the elder stories, they were in awe, hearing like some of the difficulties the elders went through when they were here. But then hearing some of the fun stories from back home, spending the day by the river, thieving Mr. Somebody's mango from his tree. And the children loved it. And they would record it and then sit and play it over at lunchtime. So it's for us to continually share our stories, good or bad, whatever the stories are. And there will always be the learning or the what you get from it. But always points to working together works, collaborating works. Back in the day when businesses happened, everybody had their own offices, they did their own thing. Now it's a round table, everybody's working around the table. Back in school, when you're doing a test, you used to hide and do your answers. Now you sit at a table and you can share, because over time, the people who run society has realized the more you collaborate, the more you get out of everything. So for us, telling our stories over and over, whether we're writing them, whether we're doing them as movies or TikTok or whatever, I don't know all the new words, but continually sharing our stories so we could learn from them. That is one of the things that's going to help us move forward. And the big thing, like the back up against the wall, it's something now you've seen, you've heard, you've experienced. I know I can say that COVID has put so much of our community together. It's just wonderful. It's just people call and say, "Oh, I was talking to this person," and it's just like, yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to talk to each other. We have to tell each other what happened. We have to tell each other how we got through situations. How the one woman got the box and she shared it with four people going down the hallway. She didn't even know those four people prior to COVID. I deliver to seniors here, and sometimes I have like seven extra boxes, and I would call seven people and say to them, do not call any other person. I only have seven boxes. And I would pull up, and there's 21 people. And they shoved me, they pushed me. It was so rough. And one time this woman came in. If you see this little woman, Jean, she pulled up and she said, everybody back up. And she came down with a knife and she cut the cabbage in four, and everybody got a piece of cabbage. And I would have never thought of doing this. I'm just bringing the box to seven people. And so since then, whatever number of boxes go there, the people that come down, everybody, even if you get one hand of bananas, that community they shared everything. Oh, she doesn't like cabbage. She doesn't have to get cabbage. How you know I don't like cabbage? And it was just always a bacchanal. None of the drivers ever want to go to that building because so by now I've been doing it long enough that when I come, they don't bum rush me anymore. But if they see a new driver come, that's advantage. That's advantage. No matter how big the man is, these little old and his women would take him down to get the boxes. But the sharing, like so Jean eventually came to pack with us, and she would tell me about all the different people. She never used to say hi to me. But COVID happened, and seven boxes came, and everybody was one family that shared everything. They'd open the bag of carrots. You get 2 carrots. You only eat 1 carrot. You don't eat so much. Like, just amazing. It was just amazing how I saw so much coming together, and it was just always beautiful. Like the first couple of times they roughed me up, it wasn't nice, but over time I realized how desperate people were for food, and especially our seniors and the culturally appropriate food, like the yam and the eddos, because the prices of those things went up drastically in the grocery stores. And I realized anything that we eat always costs more in the grocery stores. Canned beans is $3, $4. Canned ackee is $10. And it's the same place that the red beans coming from that the ackee is coming from. But ackee is special to people, and so we have to pay special ackee price. So when they got one time there was a black bikers group donated food to us, staples to us, and they donated boxes of ackee. People, the phone didn't stop ringing for like 2 weeks. People calling to say the ackee, they didn't eat ackee in 4 months, and just amazing. But we need to tell our stories. Like even if we go around these same elders, like I would love to get some funding to get some youth, because in the summer the elders are all hanging out outside. Just to go with a tape and just talk to them and get stories and compile them however way we can. Like what the AMANI Project is doing. I'm so pleased with it, but so many people are going to get to hear these stories and, be able to interact with them and go back and ask their grandmothers about it. Because we're losing the grandmothers, they in their 90s. My mom is turning 80 years old next week. And so what we've done with her is every month we come together and she'll teach us one thing that we all like. So we all love her sweetbread. So the whole family, like 20 people would come, and she would teach us how to make sweetbread. We love fried. My mom would get up in the morning on Sunday and make fry bake and drive to her 4 daughters' house and drop off fry bake for them. I said, Mom, you can't do that anymore. We're going to come and we're going to learn to make fry bake. So we need to do that with our elders, get their stories, get their recipes. and so we could continue and pass this on to, down to our children. Like, I know my granddaughter gets it because she's in our home, so it's part of what she does, but a lot of her friends don't get it with their families. So a lot of times I'm the home for the family, for the children to come and learn to cook and, talk about old stories. And so they always show me what they're watching and I tell them what I experience, and so we go back and forth like that.
So beautiful. I I want to stay with you. I want to come and sit down by the river with you, cook with you. I do. I really do. It's so wonderful to hear you share, to listen to you share, Tafari. And I was going to ask you about those last few words of wisdom. And though you've been dropping so much of it in this past hour, the telling the story stands out for me. I'm wondering before we leave, before we head out together, um, I'm so mindful of the fact that you are so guided by love in what you do. But I have to ask you those last few words of wisdom that you would share for those individuals that are wanting to do similar work, those folks who are desiring to learn the importance, the healing power, the grace, the beauty of our lands, those folks who are desiring to be vegan chefs. What are those last words of wisdom that you would share?
Well, in our society, it's important to do the formal education. Like, I don't feel I could have opened a school unless I had that teaching certificate. So for the youth, that is important for you to go and get those pieces of papers. But that lived experience is crucial. And I want to start something where I can have youth and elders come together and share. So the youth could share what they're living through, which is going to shock the elders, but for the elders to share what they've had to live with. I want the youth to go and volunteer at organizations where we're working to build our community. I want our youth to go and help seniors peel their edos and cassava. And in the same time they're peeling, they listen to stories and they learn and they get ideas. That lived experience is so crucial. My son used to run a fatherhood initiative program, the same place we were packing at YPF. And I used to teach the young men to cook because they would get their children on the weekends. So I would teach them, child-centered recipes that when their children come for the 2 days, they can cook with them. And they'd always talk about my son and big him up, and he's so wonderful. And so one day I said to him, I said, what makes you so special? What it is about you that makes these youth look up to you the way they do? And he said, Tafai, I had both life. I lived as a thug, and now I'm a dad, and I'm looking after my daughter. So I know what they're experiencing, and I could guide them to a more successful path. And at the time he was a thug, oh, I swear I got gray hair. It bothered me so much. It annoyed me. I was an educator. He dropped out of school, but it was what he needed. It was his journey of experience to put him at the point where he was 20 years later, being the most amazing ED, where he was working, being able to guide young men who were on really bad paths to come around and learn to cook and learn to make Play-Doh and sit with their children and play with Play-Doh. I don't think he would have been able to do that if he didn't have that experience that almost, made me crazy. But that was his journey. That was his life journey. And sometimes we have to honor that in people. It is important. I'm not saying that going and sitting at a university and college and getting a piece of paper is not essential, but also find education in other places. I didn't feel my education as a African-centered teacher didn't start until we had that school. That's where I learned so much about us, our people, self-esteem, slavery, slave foods. I'm always trying with the seniors to get them to eat differently because we're still eating slave foods. But all of that didn't happen for me until I got that hands-on experience. I've always worked in schools and worked in daycares, but very Eurocentric, so I didn't get that. But being surrounded by Black teachers and Black children and, everything, it took me on a different path where I was able to help more. So for these young people who are venturing out, don't let anything stop you. If you meet an old lady on the bus and she wants to talk to you, forget about your stuff and keep going and listen to her because she has knowledge that you're not going to get at York University, that you're not going to get at Seneca College. She has lived experience that she could share with you that I know those words stay in my head more than the Piaget that I read, you know? So we need to honor our elders. We need to spend time with them. We need to help them. We need to go and peel their food, vacuum their home, and just spend time with them. Um, and we're really trying for this food hub to get a huge building where we can have all these different programs. You could come and learn to cook because I will be teaching cooking classes, but to also have a senior and youth program, where they do arts and craft together because there's so much our youth are not getting that's being lost. It's only the elders can give it to them. For them, just whatever your heart leads you to, stay with that because our internal self knows what's best for us. Your mom might want you to be that doctor, but if you want to be a childcare worker, that is where your heart is. That is where you're going to succeed. That is where you're going to be happy and get a paycheck. You will get a paycheck on being a doctor, but you might not be happy. I see it with a lot of continental youth that I work with. They have to be engineer, doctor, and some of them just want to be a hip hop artist and they can't. And so they have to go into a life where they're not happy. But the youth who are listening to this, go with your heart and go wild and bold and free and just take it all in and give it all back.
I love it. I want to thank you so much. Thank you, Tafari, for this day, for this hour. And I honor you. I honor you. I thank you for these wonderful shares. I've had so much fun, yes, but also had just a wonderful time sitting and chatting with you. Thank you for all that you give to community, all that you depart, all that you impart, all that you give. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to sit with you today.
Yes, this was very nice. This was very nice. And I thank the AMANI Project and I thank Timia and Kai. Timia was our first dance teacher at Umoja Learning Circle. Timmy was there. When I went to the school was a table with some instruments, some books, and a piece of African print. And Timmy used to come in and teach the children to dance and use the couple instruments we had. So I've known her a long, long time. And her and Kai were friends before I even met her. So yeah, we go back a long time, and I'm so glad she's doing this now because I know arts was always her thing. So this is amazing to be able to get people to tell their stories and share them. That's dear to my heart. I thank Timia. This is an amazing project, and however else I can help or assist, you have my number, you have my email address. Just call me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of the above. All of the above. I feel so blessed to be able to sit down with you today. And I thank you again. I'm looking forward to that time at the river.
Yes,
Okay. We're
we will
gonna
have a river time. Maybe you
okay.
can come by this summer and spend some time in the garden.
Okay.
I plant 150 garlic in the fall, so I reap 150 organic garlic every summer that I eat throughout the year. I don't eat store garlic anymore. So you can come spend time with me in the garden this year.
I'm coming. I'm going to be coming over. Thank you so much, Tafari. It's been such a pleasure to sit down with you. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, rich wisdom, intergenerational wisdom, guided by love, 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 love. It was such a pleasure to sit down with Tafari today, and so good to spend time with you, all of you. Please be sure to stay connected with us. We want you to be a part of these very important, crucial, necessary, and needed conversations. So I will see you again very soon. Looking forward to every moment of it. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. Bye for now.